Alright, hi guys, how's it going? I've been researching some things lately, been looking up some stuff, and I have a background in history, so I've been wanting to do some more history videos. So the video that I'm going to do today is going to be on the ancient Greeks, more specifically the Spartans. Now, in order to understand the Spartans, you've got to understand a little bit about ancient Greece, because a nation's history is really shaped by its geography. That is the case with the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks were not a river valley civilization like the Mesopotamians or the Egyptians. The terrain of Greece was very rugged, it was very mountainous, it was dry in some areas, and as a result, farming and agriculture could be quite difficult. And the Greeks had to find areas and valleys where they could grow crops, and as they grew crops, their city-states, which were built around there, began to grow and expand. But as the city-states began to become more populated, the crops were not plentiful enough to sustain the population, so the Greeks had to do three things. Either they had to, colonize, which they did, so you start to get more Greeks colonizing the Mediterranean region. The Ionian Greeks settled in what's now Turkey. You had Greeks settling around the Black Sea, North Africa. So you began to get colonization among the Greeks. In addition to this, you also had some Greeks that became great sea traders, like the Phoenicians. That was definitely the case with Athens. Athens became kind of an important commercial center as a result of that. They began to trade more and, sail along the Mediterranean, trading. Now, the other thing that the Greek city-states would do is some of them would attack the other Greek city-states. And that's what you have with the Spartans. Now, the historian Thucydides talked a bit about the Spartans, and he talked about how around 800 BC there was a lot of infighting among the Spartans. There was a lot of chaos. And then around 750 BC there emerged a lawgiver. And all at once the Spartans got a law code. And the law code also structured the society. And it's interesting how they structured the society. It basically became one of Western civilization's most conservative cultures. And the reason for that was because you had the equals, and the equals were the Spartan warriors. They fought the wars for Spartan. They were, the military apparatus. Then you had the resident aliens. These were like foreigners or people from other city-states that lived in Sparta. Not a whole lot is really known about them, but it is known that they were there, and I believe they were kind of thought of as like second-class citizens. Then, after them, you had the slaves. Now, the slaves were a bit different than other slaves that you have in other cultures. The slaves in Sparta were owned by the nation, by the Spartans themselves. So Sparta owned the slaves. And Sparta owned the slaves, and the slaves were therefore used to grow the crops, to build buildings, to work in maintenance. And this enabled the equals to train in the arts of war, become really effective soldiers, because they were free to do that. They didn't have to work in agriculture. They didn't have to grow crops. They didn't have to do any of that stuff. They could just focus on, forging this elite military, unit. And that's exactly what they did. And in addition to that, you also had, and I should mention this too, you also had a secret police force. These were men, usually around 18 to 20 years old, that would kind of go around and spy and basically report on, what they have found, if there was any problems or turmoil. Sometimes there were slave revolts, so they would kind of report on how the slaves were. and they kind of report on, just how things were going. Okay, now the way the government was structured is the government had two parts. You had two parts to the ancient Spartan government. You had the assembly, and in the assembly, that consisted of the equals. The warriors, the Spartan warriors. They were a part of the assembly. They could propose certain things, like they could suggest, starting a battle. They could suggest ending a battle. They could suggest treaties, all kinds of things. But they didn't have the power to actually implement it. The power to actually implement the policy was in the hands of the council. And the council consisted of Spartans' two kings. Sparta had two kings. It was an oligarchy. And in addition to that, Sparta also had the elders. And the elders were the warriors who had become 60 years of age. Because the warriors of Sparta, from the age of 7 to 60, trained in the arts. They trained in pancration, which is kind of like an ancient form of MMA, kind of reminiscent of what you have in the UFC. Some people have even argued that, MMA should be called pancration, but that's what the Spartans had trained in. They also trained in how to use weapons and all that, but when they became 60 years old, they'd become part of this council. They would be the elders. And in addition to that, like I said, you also had the two kings that were also a part of the council. And they would make the decisions for Sparta of what to do. They had the real power in the society. In fact, like I said, there were two kings. One king would actually go along with the troops in battle, and the other king would actually, stay back in Sparta. So that's, how they structured that. And like I said, you did have these elders. Now, what we know about Sparta comes not from the Spartans themselves, but from the people who lived around Sparta, the other Greeks. The Greeks from Athens. They greatly admired and revered the Spartans. They really admired their society a lot. And another thing to really add was the fact that Spartans didn't really value reading and writing as much. The other Greeks, they did. They valued that stuff. They valued, poetry and, speaking poetically. The Spartans were said to have talked, or were said to be laconic speakers. Laconic speech is Spartan speech. And that's basically speaking basically if someone asks you something, you respond with one word, or you respond with one sentence. That is laconic speech. And that's the way the Spartans were said to have talked, like I said. And basically think of like Clint Eastwood, that kind of like Clint Eastwood one-liner way of talking. Didn't really say much when he was like Dirty Harry, That would be laconic speech. Now, another thing I want to add, the Spartans did control their region, and the region was kind of the southernmost part of Greece, and they created what was called the Peloponnesian League. And the Peloponnesian League was kind of, I wouldn't call it like the United Nations, but it was something that Sparta ran, where the Spartans would see the way the other city-states were run, the kinds of governments they had, and basically give their approval or let those other city-states know that they needed to make changes in their government structure, because the Spartans did not like democracies. They associated democracies with chaos. And, the Greeks, some of the city-states had democracies, some had monarchies, some had oligarchies. So there were different kinds of things, but the Spartans, like I said, didn't like democracies. So, that's, kind of, what you have happening in, Sparta. Very interesting. Like I said, I've read some things about it. Don't really hear, a whole lot about this. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. And like I said, I do plan on doing more videos kind of like this, more historical videos. So that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.